Hoi, I'm Cybr. We played D&D again this week. We did take a week break because things happened. Things went pretty alright. We started off in Serenia. The players had just spoken with the buyer, who had pointed them in the direction of Orvo Mustave, the companion who, along with Ergen Winth, the victim who started off this whole mystery, unleashed the whole outbreak of frigid woe that was happening back in the Graying Wildlands. The players went to Orvo and immediately started off with, hey, we're looking for the antidote to this deadly virus that we're looking for. It took a little bit for him to give the information that the players were really asking for. I still don't think that he's put together that the vials that he and Ergen have found were, in fact, the frigid woe. He certainly doesn't know that Ergen is dead. He mentioned him a couple of times. The characters did not mention the fact that he is dead. Whoops. The players also took the time to get a few supplies. Number one, they needed a map of the region. I think the adventure as presented has Orvo or Morgo or the buyer, one of the Serenia NPCs, give them a map. But whenever I had first, and this was months and months and months ago, whenever I first started prepping for the adventure, I actually made a NPC, a standard NPC block that uses the Cartographer Ranger subclass, co-developed by Devin Rue. I sort of wanted that to be the go-to cartographer in Serenia. I did not get them all set up, or I did not have a specific original character in mind ready by the time we had started the adventure, and did not have the time to go back and actually set them in stone. So I panicked and I made a red tiefling named Ruby. It was supposed to be a play on Devin Rue. I forgot that there is a red tiefling called the Ruby of the Sea in Exandria. Again, whoops. So they went to talk to her. In the middle of the adventure, I'm sure this didn't come across organically, even though it was definitely all coming out on the spot. For 10 gold, Ruby would give them a map of Eiselcross. Whenever the characters go out and explore or find a location and eventually come back to her or another member of the Cartographer's Guild, the Guild of Beacons in Exandria, those locations through her magic would be added to the map completely accurately once, she is given a thorough enough account of them. And that was sort of supposed to lean into the subclass features of the Cartographer Ranger subclass that I did not review before this game, but also I just wanted to kind of gamify that a little bit more. This is an adventure about going out, exploring something, coming back. It's a sort of West Marches, but not really. Sort of a hex crawl. So I thought that was just a good way to do that. And they don't have to keep coming to Serenia. There would be another cartographer in Vormus and Balin Post that they would also be able to visit. And maybe in one of the other areas. It's at this point that Darius took the opportunity to dig into one of his backstory things. He has a map. Man, this cartographer seems like they would be very helpful here. Yeah, he has a map to a location that he does not know, but he knows that it is somewhere in Eiselcross. Ruby was given the map to copy, and while the characters are out traveling the wilds, she will be referencing a lot of the other maps that she has to sort of find out where this location actually is. Whenever the characters return, she will have used her resources to pinpoint where that location is, and Darius will have a way to follow through on his Heroic Chronicle narrative hook, which is that he has a treasure map that leads to inheritance. I have something planned there. It is not fully fleshed out, but I think I have a decent enough narrative thread there to put something together that's pretty nice. Also digs a little bit further into some lore that I should probably triple check before I make it canon. The characters also took this opportunity to go get supplies for the trip ahead. Normally, with the adventure as written, there are no shops or trade caravans or anything within Serenia. Any supplies that they would need to trade with other explorers in order to get. However, we are eventually going to lead into Rime of the Frostmaiden, or some of the content from there. One of those starting adventures involves a trade caravan called Torgs. So I immediately dropped Torgs into there so that the characters have something to follow up on later whenever that adventure sort of comes to light. So Torga Icevein, and her security detail were all there, willing to trade items. Items that were being sold for double a reasonable value because of reasons that are presented in Rime of the Frostmaiden. The characters were searching for a sled that would help them get around a little bit faster because they are on a time limit, and possibly a few dogs to help pull that. Normally, a dog sled costs 20 gold? Yes, dog sleds normally cost 20 gold, and a sled dog would cost 50 gold. Because Torga is selling everything for double their value, dog sleds were 40 gold, dogs are 100 gold. Definitely unreasonable for level 2 adventures just starting out and who haven't really been paid for anything yet. So they definitely went to go look elsewhere. Not before noticing that one of Torga's security detail looks significantly underdressed for the area, and when confronted about it, just said, well, the cold doesn't bother me. Sure, that's something to worry about. But the characters still needed to get the rest of their equipment, in this case, snowshoes, crampons, stuff to get around and not slip on the ice. So we did a couple things. Number one, I sort of put my players on the spot to be like, okay, what's this explorer NPC that has the equipment that you want? That takes a little bit of the pressure off me, and it also makes it a little bit of a fun challenge to be like, okay, let me take the details that you give me about this character and immediately bring them to life. The monks player, which is like, I want this crotchety old man who just got here. He's smoking a pipe, he's resting and everything, but he's a good fella. So I'm like, okay, I got you, Sonny. That was fun, and they were able to get the dog sled through that. Then we did a little montage, just so that they could get the rest of their items just by, talking to the people in Serenia about what they're doing, the crisis that they're trying to avert, and with some very good checks, they ended up getting the rest of their stuff on loan, just so that they can get this crisis solved, save the family who's infected with this disease, and get everything back to the Greying Wildlands as quick as possible. And then whenever they get back, either return the stuff that they borrowed or actually be able to buy it once they sell the items that they scavenge from Salsvault. Originally, as presented, it was going to be about 200 miles to get from Serenia to Salsvault, so it would have been way over here, just in the ice, way up here somewhere. I thought that was way too far, and I didn't want to make the characters travel that far. So I moved it significantly closer, and just called it about 100 miles. It's, around here. The important parts of the adventure still remain. We had a little bit of a random encounter check. I say that. Those of you who watched these all the way through may remember that I actually had prepared these beforehand, using a few of the tables as inspiration. The first one came from the Eiselcross encounters, where they had come across a few wild folk who were in the middle of hunting a saber-toothed tiger, or a saber cat. So these indigenous hunters were running low on ammunition, see the players coming along, notices that one of them has a bow. They're like, hey, can we trade for some ammunition because we really need to take down this saber-toothed tiger? They were like, oh, okay, well, what do you have? And they're like, okay, well, we have some healing salves, which would be equivalent to a potion of healing, which came in clutch later. And they would be able to share a little bit of the information about not Salsvault specifically, but like the area. Whenever that was agreed upon, they were given enough ammunition to continue their hunt, and they were like, okay, Salsvault and all the ruins of this civilization, bad stuff. We don't go there. It's a cursed place. You should probably heed that warning as well. But we do know where it is, and you are going the right way. It's a little bit further up here. What else do they know about the area? Oh, well, specifically around here, some seals like to rest on the ice sheets. That was going to be the next encounter. Don't kill a lot of them, because that's frowned upon. Also, be careful of white worms. Like, what? Like dragons. Dragons? Ain't nobody said anything about dragons. But with that, they were off and quickly made their way onto the ice sheets. The adventure says that this happens around like 40 miles after leaving Serenia. So, about the same time. I sort of wanted that to be like the halfway mark and not have the characters just be on ice the entire time. I should also point out that the characters did have a dog sled, but no dog. But Teague, the druid, does have a moorbounder that Faye got from their Hero Chronicle, which was, thanks to a natural 20 on an animal handling check, is a-okay with pulling a dog sled. So the characters were off, and for another, the characters continued traveling for another day or so, and a blizzard hit. Navigating during a blizzard requires a whole separate skill challenge. The players decided, you know what, it's blizzardy, we're gonna hunker down. We have some tents and everything, we can just nail down on the ice, set up the tents and everything, and just wait out the storm. Good decision. No checks needed to be made if all you're doing is trying to just like lay down and survive. They weren't the only ones doing this, because a group of seals had also hunkered down and waited up the storm. Characters didn't fuck with them. Another good decision. And so they continued until they eventually made their way to Salsvault. I've been playing with this group a while, and they recognize a few of my weaknesses. One of the most apparent is that I hate running dungeons. Not just hate running dungeons, I hate prepping dungeons. It has become a very normal thing that I have recognized as a problem, where in the middle of running a dungeon, I will stop and try to reread my notes to figure out what is actually going on. It's happened a few times. The first one was right whenever the characters found the dungeon. Because there is a pair of mephits who just sort of hang out around the ruins of Salsvault and sort of like leave a trail because they're just like hanging out around there. And if the characters roll high enough on their survival, they will find this trail and be able to follow it. And I probably should have recognized a couple things. Number one, following mephit trails, especially whenever you describe them as nasty things that don't really have any tie to the plot, probably not going to get your players where they need to go. Number two, probably should have recognized that whenever the players roll high enough on this check, as is noted in the section of approaching the dungeon, they would just be able to see the dungeon. So they did find it and know that these mephits were also going there. They arrive, but having known that the mephits were there, they had tried to sneak up on them, weren't actually getting the drop on them, but quickly took care of it anyway. Not a problem. Super chill encounter. That was the only one. As soon as the players enter Salsvault, which number one did require the door to be melted open because it was frozen over, which I didn't do a good job of explaining. And whenever the players had first entered the rooms and, were conversing with each other, the Adventure has it so that anytime somebody is speaking in either the entry room or the room where Orvo and Ergen originally found the Frigid Woe, they would alert some animated armor that will come and investigate. It doesn't really explain what they do after. I assume just attack, but I had them at least be like pointing outward, like, you're not authorized to be here, you need to leave. And the players didn't. They were trying to converse with armor that had no way of communicating. So they got into an initiative. One of my players is very familiar with D&D 5th edition and recognized that this was going to be a slog because animated armor has an AC of 18, which is very high for second level characters. And it did take a while. People were getting very beat up, and it didn't help that, well, if you've seen any of Critical Role that deals with the city of Aor, you will recognize that Aor is a place where the magical fallout can trigger wild magic surges. The Frozen Sick adventure, as written, does not have any wild magic surges trigger in Salsvault. But I had finally moved over my custom wild magic table, which was composed of the normal sorcerer wild magic stuff, the chaos magic surge from Kobold Press in their entropy wizard, as well as the unraveling magic supernatural reason from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, reworked so that it makes sense to do in a short amount of time. Because I had only just remembered to move it over, I wanted to play with it. So I did. And my player rolled a 0, which triggers a wild magic surge once during a round every minute. This had unexpected consequences. This particular table does have some of the more mean effects, but I wanted to have a balance of things that were helpful and things that were just off the wall, without a large number of things that would actively kill the party. A few of the surges that were triggered were casting Barkskin. If you die, you get reincarnated, and notably, that you get sent to the astral plane for a little bit. That was fun, except for it did take a character out of combat for a whole round, which, whenever you're already in a slog, any time a character doesn't really get their action, doesn't feel good. And you know, I had to recognize that. But eventually the animated armors were defeated, and the characters continue to explore, eventually making their way to that animated armor laboratory, finding a blacksmith, who was in fact a zombie, pinned in the laboratory where they were created, and turned back whenever they realized there were more zombies in the next hallway. And then they went back, found the disease storage laboratory with signs everywhere saying, "This is where the diseases are stored. Authorized personnel only." Because I don't do a very good job of prepping, I forgot that the door going from the entrance area into here was supposed to be locked. So they made it in here without really any issues of security, which means whenever one of the characters pulled on the door to get into area S6 and tried to force it open, they triggered the trap without recognizing that, oh, this is a more secure area. That trap teleported them into, across the ruin, back to the hallway that they were about to bust into a room full of animated flying swords. Things did not go well. Immediately upon landing here, the flying swords animated and were starting to attack. The other characters, the rogue realized that, oh shit, they teleported. If it was here protecting this room, they were probably not being teleported to the other side of this door. We should probably go back to the other side and see if we can find them. So started dashing across and made their way over here, pretty close to where they can hear the sounds of battle, but quickly got ambushed by the 3 zombies that they decided to not engage with before. Everybody else is following after, and whenever you have one character stuck in a room with 5 other enemies, sometimes bad things happen. The character was knocked out. Whenever you get knocked out in this area, because there is shrapnel and blades lying about, whenever you fall prone, you take more damage. Whenever you take damage, whenever you're knocked out, like you take failed saving throws for death. So, because of the way initiative was working, this character had 2 failed death saves before their turn came up again, before anybody else could get to them. They rolled a 15, they were good. Everybody else could hear the swords, attacking, were able to get to the room in time. I just had the swords just sort of hang around whenever the character had fallen unconscious because I wasn't trying to kill people. But if I was a more ruthless DM, our monk would have died. It was still a definite possibility. The characters were, trying to deal with the zombies and the swords at the same time, and I may have hinted at, by asking, hey, where is everybody at between these 2 rooms? We don't run on, I give my players the map, but I don't actually run encounters on a battle map. So I pretty much just let my players tell me where they are, and we try to theater the mind it. By me asking or prompting the players to tell me where they are, I may have hinted at the fact that, hey, the animated weapons are all in this room. Many of you are not in this room. Swords cannot open doors. If you get out of this room, you may be able to end this encounter without killing the swords. And they did pick up on that, and eventually shut the door after the zombies were taken care of. More wild magic surges were happening, one of which was a very fun one from the Chaos Magic Surges from Cobalt Press. Very similar to the Potted Plant Wild Magic Surge, Cobalt Press has one where you turn into a ham, where you are incapacitated and have vulnerability to damage. I just had the zombies start eating the ham, and then the player popped back as if they were under the effects of a polymorph spell. That made sense to me. I was already very hesitant to try and kill one player. I didn't want that to happen to another, especially because of a wild magic surge. But they got out and went back to take another short rest. At this point, we were kind of almost overtime, so if the players were just like, we wanted to take a long rest, that is where I would have ended it. But they did want to peek in a couple of other rooms. And so they took a short rest. They used the healing salves that they got from the wild folk and continued their exploration for just a little bit. They peeked into 2 rooms, Area S16 and Area S17. I understand that by giving my players the map, they can tell what the order the rooms are described in, which may have an effect on what they try to explore. I hate prepping dungeons. I'm okay with this. They went to Area S16, all beat up at this point, and immediately noticed that there was a big red X drawn across the front of the door and could hear loud banging from within. They decided, we're going to leave that for now. And then they went to Area S17, popped in, and noticed a undead humanoid walking around performing alchemy. the character turned back to them and spoke in a archaic Draconic, the language of Eor, and asked, "What's thou doing here?" It's archaic Draconic, so I'm like, the worst ye old English that I can. And the players immediately responded, "We need the cure to the fresh blow." And that's where we ended it. Mostly so that I can take some time to figure out how this character is going to react. What are we going to do for next time? Well, this character is the person who created the disease that they are trying to get the cure from. His name is Salsvault. Salsvault. He's the one that it's named after. He is absolutely willing to give the characters the cure if he has any reason to trust them. He's been cooped up here for 800 years and is continuously trying to perfect this virus that was built specifically to infect and destroy the gods. I think he might engage the characters a little bit more and maybe might lead on with the fact that, what are you doing here? You don't have authorization. I can't have you destroy this. What if our enemies know that you're here? What if they're using you to get at my creation? I don't have any assurances that you're not one of the gods that we'd intend to, that you're not allied with the very gods that we seek to destroy. Which, might give the characters a little bit of, it's like, oh shit, I should get ahead of this conversation a little bit. My players are definitely very afraid of what else lies in this dungeon, and should be, and definitely don't want to explore it all the way through. A good decision, or a decision that's not going to get them killed. So, I don't imagine that they'll spend much more time in Salsvault, and will very quickly get on the road back to Serenia. There are a couple of encounters that I do have planned there that I've spoke about last time. One is they are going to come face to face with the ancient white dragon that's in the adventure, Arviatris. Not in a fight, but just to see them. And I think they're going to encounter an abandoned campsite where they'll find a bag of holding, which is just creepy in its own right, which I think will be fun to seed. They'll make it back and be able to turn in the reward and be able to level up. Hopefully I'll have a little bit more planned with the further adventure with Rime of the Frostmaiden, but I may need to take a little bit of extra time in order to make sure that I have all the threads that I make sense to continue, at least from or at least from Serenia. Or maybe the players want to immediately go somewhere else. I don't know. I will be honest, I have not taken a lot of time to think about this game. I haven't had a lot of time to think about this game and how prepping Rime the Frostmaiden is going to be. I may need to take a little bit more time to get that all ready. Plus, Bizbins was delayed a week, so I might need to put off getting everybody to level 3 for that to come out. But yeah, that's where our game's at right now. I hope that this wasn't a rambling mess. We might be back next week to see how the adventure wraps up and how the encounter with the Aeorian alchemist Feral Sal wraps up, and see how this ties into the bigger adventure. I can't wait. But that's where we're going to leave it. I will see y'all later.